Hey everyone, it's Lucas and today I'm going to be answering some of your guys' questions about playing soccer here in Brazil. Alright, so one of the main questions that I get asked a lot is why did I choose Brazil out of other countries or just instead of staying in Florida where I'm from? I think one of the main things was because I wanted to get that Brazilian experience, Most of us when we think of Brazil and soccer, we think Neymar, Pelé, like all that flair. So I think that was one of the things that I was kind of like interested in, that I wanted to kind of get a little bit from. Yeah, and also see my dad, he's from Brazil, so that part also helped, I would say. I wasn't completely going into a new country that I wasn't familiar with. I think that was like one of the main things. I wanted to get that Brazilian experience and see if I could add that to my game. Alright, so another question was, how does the soccer culture in Brazil compare to the US? And this is like an interesting one because I think it kind of depends where you are in the US. In Florida, there's a lot of Hispanics, people from other parts of the world, so they really bring that soccer culture to Florida, I think. But I would have to say that here it is like the dominant sport. So in the US you have lots of people, basketball, people who like baseball, people who like football, American football. So I think here, because it dominates so much, people really care about the sport. So you have kids, most kids, boy and girl, are wanting to be soccer players or want to have experience and everything. So I do think that the culture here in Brazil, for at least for soccer, is they heavily focus on it. Okay, so now we have another question here. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced transitioning from US soccer to Brazilian soccer? So I think one of the main things was physicality, I would have to say, because in the US, like I assume, and I play there as well, it is a physical sport. You do have a lot of tackles, shoulder bumps and all that. But here they step it up another level. Here they have this thing where they don't care what the referee is gonna do. If they have to receive a yellow card or a red card, they'll do it. Here they can shove you a little bit, or they'll step on your foot when the referee is not looking. So they always have that little thing that they try doing, one up you. So that's one thing that I noticed here. It's tough. I've adapted slowly, but it continues being tough to deal with. So I think that's one thing. And then another thing I would say is adapting to the fields and the ball. So where I am, I'm in São Paulo. So São Paulo's it's a big city. It's like New York, but here in Brazil. And a lot of the fields here, you rarely ever see natural grass. So you're never really gonna see, at least here in São Paulo, natural grass fields. So what we have here is society fields, and that's like I explained in my day in the life video. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. Like turf, but it's almost like a carpet. It's very thin, so you don't even use like actual cleats for like grass. You use like a mix of cleats for grass and then a mix of cleats indoors. So it's like very thin. I'll show you guys later. I think that's one thing, because of that, a lot of those little turf pieces that you have, it makes the ball bounce like crazy. So here, that's one thing that I noticed that my touch, I feel like go all over the place because of that the ball is bouncing so much. It's super unpredictable. So that at times is definitely an issue that I struggle with. But as you stay here more time, you adapt more to the field, more to the environment, I would say. Different in training sessions from US soccer to Brazilian soccer, intensity, how is that? So one thing that I would say is that here I do feel like you get a higher intensity in the training sessions, and it doesn't matter, like I'm not with a big team at the moment. I'm with a team called Penapolense, and that's a team around like the 6th or 7th division of Brazilian soccer. No matter what, the intensity is always at a maximum, as it can be. Everybody's being aggressive, everybody's trying to score goals, trying to do passes. If you don't do the correct pass, they'll yell at you and everything. So I do think that is one thing that I noticed. And especially here in Brazil, a lot of places you aren't paying for soccer. So compared to US soccer, we're just kind of pay to play, unless you are in one of those MLS academies or are on a scholarship at a D1 college, D2, all that. I will say that the training sessions are a bit weak in the US compared to Brazil here. And I think that's something that the US needs to work on, getting their training sessions a little bit more, have a little bit higher intensity. I do think that depends on the coaches as well, but here at least I've trained with around 3-4 different teams. In each team that I'm at, the intensity is always like this, so they never drop that. And I think especially that's something because a lot of people here in Brazil are low income, so this is kind of like their only opportunity. Some of them try taking as a way out of being poverty, you know. So I do think that is one of the big things that I noticed. So another question I get asked a lot is how do Brazilians react to me being an American, me not being from Brazil? And it's actually kind of funny. Everybody loves it, at least where I've been. You know, they all think it's interesting because you never really see people from outside of Brazil coming into Brazil to play. So, you know, a lot of them have said, oh, you're the first gringo that I've ever met. You know, so that's interesting sometimes because, especially Sao Paulo, it's a very touristic city. So I do think it is a little bit interesting, but they all really like it and they all welcome me. Thankfully, I am somewhat fluent in Portuguese, so I would say that it's a little easier for me. But I think if you're coming into Brazil not really knowing the language, you'll definitely pick it up quick because that's all they speak here. But there are a couple on the team that they speak English, so you know, if there's certain times where I need to ask something, they can try helping me piece together the stuff that I didn't know. So but I will say that they all enjoy the fact that I am American, and they all love that, and they always ask me questions about it. So I do think that's an interesting part. So another question I got asked was, how has playing in Brazil helped you improve as a player? And I think I will say there's a number of things that I've improved on. One is speed, agility, you know, especially because I'm playing on the wing, and here you have to be quick, you have to be precise, you have to be aggressive. So I think that's another thing, being my aggressiveness. You know, I've kind of had to up that a notch because if not, you're just gonna get the ball taken from you, and you know, nobody wants that, right? So I think that's one thing. I think that crossing as well, you know, so you learn a little bit of everything, but I think that's one thing, like speed and agility, something that you're definitely gonna get a lot better at. In touch as well, touch, you know, you improve a lot here if you're doing the correct stuff. So I think that's one of the main things. Those are like the three main things that I feel like I've improved on as a player. But every day, you know, I'm trying to improve, so I think that's something. What advice would you give to other American players who are interested in playing in Brazil or trying to get an experience playing in South America? I think it really depends on your situation. Like I mentioned before, my dad, he is Brazilian, so that part definitely helps because he was born in Sao Paulo. So he spent around 24 years out of almost half his life here in Brazil. So that is important just to kind of know, because Brazil especially, it's kind of certain parts that you have to be careful when you're going. So I do think it kind of depends on your situation. If you are going to be staying with people who know the area, I do recommend it. I do recommend also learning the language, because it's not like Spain or Europe where, you know, you're there and you can kind of get by with not speaking the main language because of the fact that most people speak English. Here, that's not really gonna flow, at least not where I am in Sao Paulo. So I would say kind of see where your position is at. Are you able to come to Brazil? How long are you able to stay? Can you do school here? Can you do school online? So I do think it's a case-to-case situation. Would I consider playing professional soccer, semi-professional soccer here in Brazil, or do I plan on returning to the US? So I do plan on returning to the US. I will be returning in May. This video was filmed in March, so for sure in May I will be coming back. I came here in February, so I'll be here around 3 to 4 months. At the moment, I'm not really sure yet if I will return to Brazil after going back to the US. The season here is a little bit different. So the season here is kind of like January kind of starts mainly like the games February all the way up until November. So here it's a lot different than the actual US soccer season. So that is something that I'm kind of debating about, whether I should return and stay in the US or return and come back to Brazil and stay another 3-4 months until the season ends in November. So that is something that I'm still debating about. One of the things that I've been trying to see is what club I'm with. You know, obviously I'm training with my club Penapolense, but things can always change, especially in Brazil. You know, you try out for a team with a bit of a better academy system, and you never know, something could happen. So I do think I will have to see once the time comes closer. But as of right now, in May, I think I'll be staying in the US. But that's just at the moment. If anything happens, you guys in. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, if I should stay here or if I should go back to US and stay there. So let me know. So I got another question. How are the facilities here in Brazil? Are they better? Are they worse than the facilities in the US? And one thing I will say is it kind of depends. You know, I know I've mentioned this before, but it really does depend. Where I train, and I'll show you guys a video, it's close to a favela actually. So right, like on the field, you know, you have your field and everything, and on one side of the field you literally have houses. Like this is kind of like the fence, and like right here is another houses. So you have houses almost directly on the field. The fields aren't always going to be the greatest, as we know, in the US as well, but here they do use a lot of turf. But when it comes to actual like natural grass, it's not always going to be the best either. So I don't think the fields here are always like the best, but I do think that can also be an advantage, because when you play a lot of time on fields that aren't good, or that the ball bounces a lot, it really does help you with your control, getting a little bit more used to that. Because if you're always just playing on perfect fields, the day that you play on a bad field, you know, it's going to be tough for you. So I do think that it's important to also not always train on fields that are the grass perfectly cut, you can see the lines perfectly, you know what I mean, the goal even having a net. I'm thankful that, like, at least where I'm training, it is somewhat a reasonable field compared to others I've seen in the city. But you know, that is one thing that I will say. Now when it comes to the gym facilities and all that stuff, I will say that is pretty good. It is close to what we have in the US, so that part is kind of similar. But when it comes to fields, it really can differ depending on where you're at. But it is interesting. Now wrapping it up, what is the biggest lesson I've learned from my time here in Brazil? And I think it's interesting because even though you hear it a lot, don't take stuff for granted is an important thing. You know, when I'm here sometimes and you're passing by places that are low income places, favelas is what they call here, most of you guys will be familiar with. Although at times it does look nice, you know, like you see the one in Rio, it does look nice. It's not a nice place to live in. So I do, whenever we're passing by there, you know, you kind of like think about things and you say, okay, maybe sometimes we take stuff that we have in the US for granted. So that's an important thing. And even don't take your opportunities for granted. You know, I see a lot of those kids, and I talk to a lot of my teammates, and a lot of them, this is kind of their only way that they plan on getting rich from. You know, they say it's either this or they don't really even know. They don't even have a second option. This is their plan A, plan B, plan C. So I think that's one of the important things, you know, not to take things for granted. And you kind of see when you're in Brazil why so many Brazilians are coming from here and to Europe. You know, you see Endrick, Estevo, Vini Jr. You see all these amazing Brazilian players that are coming from these academies, and you see because they really put their heart into it, their sweat into it. You know, they breathe, live, eat soccer. So I think that's one thing that I've learned to kind of adapt to. And I think the US, especially if they want to be good with soccer, that's kind of how they have to shift their mentality, that the kids need to, you know, players there, they need to really love soccer. If not, if they're just doing it for fun, if they're playing soccer and they're also playing basketball and they're also playing track, you know, it doesn't work. You have to really put your time and money into one sport, the one sport that you really love. And I think that's why Brazil is so good at soccer. That's why Argentina is so good at soccer, Spain, wherever, because they put all that attention towards that one sport, and that's what really brings them the success. So that's what I think. On that note, I do want to wrap up the video. Thank you so much everyone for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any more comments, anything else you want to ask me, I will be answering them down below, or if I need to, I'll make a part 2 about being here in Brazil and playing soccer. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.